Asterisk my own son's girlfriend looked me straight in the eye and said, "We'll take the upstairs. My mom needs the guest room." She twirled a key I never gave her while sipping coffee at my table like she owned the place. My son sat there, silent, letting it happen. That was the moment I realized they weren't visiting. They were moving in. I didn't answer right away. The kettle still hissed on the stove, and I turned it off just to buy myself a second of silence. My heart wasn't racing. It was sinking. Avery, my son Mason's girlfriend, wandered through my hallway like a real estate agent. She ran her hand along the banister, peeked at the closets, and declared, "It's perfect. Mom's knees aren't great, so she'll need the bigger guest room. Mason and I don't mind the smaller one for now. For now." Like this wasn't temporary. Like my house had been assigned to them. I looked at Mason, my boy, the one I raised alone after the accident that took his father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just rubbed the back of his neck and stared at the coaster under his coffee mug like this whole thing was rehearsed. "You've already given her a key?" I finally asked. My voice was calm. Too calm. "Oh, she had one from when we house sat last fall," Avery said quickly. "I made a copy. Just in case. Just in case." I didn't say no. I didn't say yes. I poured the coffee, slid mugs toward them, and listened while they talked about how grateful they were. How hard it had been to find a good place where 3 adults and 2 kids could live comfortably. And now that we have this, everything feels easier. Now that we have this, I smiled quietly, excused myself, and stepped onto the porch. I stared at my own front yard, my own mailbox, and realized this wasn't a visit. This was a takeover. And I was the last one to find out. 3 weeks earlier, I'd signed the papers on this house, my dream after 50 years of working double shifts, raising Mason alone, and burying a husband too soon. It wasn't the biggest house I could afford, but it was the right one. A cedar-sided cottage 30 steps from the lake. Hardwood floors. A porch that caught the sunrise. I bought it with no cosigner, no loan, no family help. My name was the only one on the deed. For the first time in decades, I had something that was mine. For 3 weeks, it felt holy. Then Avery started with her ideas. Paint the guest bathroom a coastal blue. Add built-ins in the den for the kids' books. Maybe put up a gate in the backyard. She said we should. We could. We will. As if my signature had printed their names on the deed to. I stayed quiet, nodded, poured coffee. But I noticed. Then came the mail. A plain envelope with a name that wasn't mine. Jonna Carlson, Avery's mother. Addressed to my house. At first I thought it was a mistake. But the post office clerk confirmed it. A forwarding order had been filed. Someone had officially redirected Jeanette's mail to my address. The signature wasn't mine. I drove home in silence. My chest was heavy, not with fear, but with fury that someone had made a decision about my life without even telling me. That night I pulled out the deed, ran my thumb over the embossed seal. My house, my name. And yet, the air felt stolen. Dinner at their place a few nights later confirmed everything. I brought a homemade pie, same as always. Mason kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong. The kitchen smelled of lemon and garlic, kids chasing each other barefoot through the hall, music low. Avery sat at the head of the table. When the children left the room, she tapped her glass. "We're so lucky," she began. "Not everyone has a chance to live in a multi-generational home. It's a gift. And with your health still strong, you'll thrive with company. Elders need company." I froze. Elders thrive. Company, Mason nodded, chewing, like it was a rehearsed speech. Avery smiled. "We've already started making some space. Mom's looking forward to the lake. She'll move things in slowly. No pressure, no pressure." I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, but every word burned. That night, I went home and called a locksmith, then a lawyer, because I knew they thought I was soft. They thought I was too tired to fight, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. Asterisk. The locksmith came at sunrise. A quiet man with a toolbox and a clipboard. He didn't ask why I wanted every single lock changed. He just nodded and went to work. By the time the sun spilled across the porch, I held 4 new keys in my hand. For the first time in weeks, I felt the house exhale. But peace didn't last. 2 days later, a group text pinged my phone. The preview froze me in place. "Avery C. Her house will need a refresh once we're fully in. Fully in." I opened the thread. 6 names. Avery, her sister, a cousin, even some friend I'd only met once. They were planning out our new home in detail. Paint colors, storage ideas, turning my reading nook into a yoga corner. Someone asked if the garage could be converted for her mom's crafts. One message made my blood run cold. "Kristen L. Does she even know yet?" Avery C. Not officially, but she'll adjust. I didn't reply. I screenshotted every single word and emailed it to myself. Evidence, insurance. Then I stared at my phone until my hands stopped shaking. That evening Mason texted, "Can we drop off a few boxes this weekend? Just a few things to get started." I typed one word. No. He didn't reply. By Saturday morning, I knew they'd test me. Sure enough, I saw their SUV crunch up my gravel drive. Avery in front, Mason trailing behind, and Avery's mother, Jeanne, clutching a casserole dish wrapped in foil like a peace offering. Avery didn't knock. She shoved the key into the lock. Nothing. She tried again, harder this time. Mason stood behind her, shifting uncomfortably. Jeanne adjusted the casserole like she was waiting for applause. I opened the door just a crack. Held out a cardboard box labeled Avery. Inside, her redirected mail, a couple of brochures she'd left, and the fraudulent forwarding form from the post office. No words. No explanations. Just the box. She fumbled, caught it at the last second. Mason opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I shut the door slowly, firmly. No slam, no lock click. Just an end. For a moment, silence. Then tires crunching away. The threat started the next day. A text from Avery. "We'll be telling people what really happened. How you locked your own family out. How you embarrassed us." I ignored it. By noon, Mason called. His voicemail was long, exhausted, dripping with excuses. This got out of hand. Avery just wanted to make it work. "You overreacted." Not one word of apology. That evening, my neighbor Theda knocked with a bag of groceries. "That girl came by earlier," she whispered, asking if I'd seen signs of elder neglect. I nearly dropped the bag of hedge clippers I was holding. Elder neglect. They were painting me as incompetent, as unfit to live alone. Theda saw the fury in my face and just nodded. "I told you she was trouble." By Monday morning, the fallout spread. My realtor, Brenna, who had helped me close on the house, called. "Have you seen Avery's posts? She's vague, but she's implying you can't manage the property. Something about inherited property, too. She's fishing for sympathy." I felt my stomach twist. Then Brenna laughed softly. "Don't worry. I already posted in a homeowner's forum. Anonymously, of course. Let's just say people aren't buying her story. It's going viral." Sure enough, within hours, strangers online were sharing their own horror stories of children or in-laws trying to take over homes. The comments poured in, "Protect your peace. She has no claim. Change the locks. Lawyer up." But one message stood out. A woman wrote, "If they're setting up a paper trail about your health, they might try for guardianship. Watch out." Guardianship. The word lodged in my chest like a stone. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced the living room, staring at the moonlight on the lake. I remembered every sacrifice I'd made for Mason and the extra shifts, the trips I couldn't afford but gave him anyway, the coin collection I sold to pay tuition. And now my son and his girlfriend were building a case to strip me of the one thing I had left, my independence. I wasn't going to let it happen. The next morning I called my lawyer again. She listened quietly as I explained the texts, the fake mail forwarding, the threats about neglect. Then she said, "We'll need documentation. Start a log. Every message, every visit, every post you see. We'll build a wall higher than they can climb." So I did. I printed texts, screenshots, even Avery's smug Instagram caption about creating a family home by the lake. I filed them neatly in a folder labeled contingency. But then, the unexpected twist, Avery showed up at my workplace. I was restocking supplies at the small town clinic where I still did part-time scheduling. She strolled right through the lobby with that saccharine smile plastered on her face. "Just here to check on you," she said loudly enough for the receptionist to hear. "We worry about you alone in that big house." I froze. Every word was bait, meant to sound sweet but to plant doubt in front of witnesses. My coworkers glanced at me. One raised an eyebrow. I smiled tightly. "I'm fine, Avery. And so is my house." But inside, I was shaking. She wasn't just moving in. She was moving against me. That evening, I sat on the porch with my coffee, staring at the still water. The birds were settling into the trees. My hands trembled as I held the mug. I realized something chilling. Avery wasn't going to back down. She was escalating. And if she was building a case to take my home legally, then I would have to strike first. The question wasn't if I would fight. The question was how savage I was willing to be. Asterisk. It happened on a Saturday morning. I'd just come back from the farmer's market, basket full of apples, when I noticed the crowd on my front lawn. Cars lined the street. People were pulling out their phones. And right in the middle of my driveway stood Avery on a folding chair, megaphone in hand. "Elder abuse is real," she bellowed like a street preacher. "My partner's mother is living alone and in safe conditions." I froze. "What?" Behind her, Jeanne stood clutching a cardboard sign, "Protect Family Homes." Mason was off to the side, holding the hands of his kids, looking like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. But he didn't stop her. He didn't say a word. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Some stepped out with phones raised. One guy even asked, "Should we call someone?" Avery pointed at me the second I stepped onto the porch. There she is. The woman locking her family out of their rightful home. She needs help, not isolation. I swear, for 1 second, my heart stopped. Then heat rushed into my chest like wildfire. And safe conditions. I yelled back, my voice shaking with fury. You mean the house I paid for, built for myself, and locked so you couldn't steal it? The crowd stirred. Phones went higher. This was a show now. Avery gasped theatrically, hand pressed to her chest. You hear that? Aggression. Classic sign she's not coping. I laughed loud, sharp, bitter. Aggression. Honey, you broke into my life, stole my mail, and tried to hand my bedroom to your mother. You want to talk coping? How about coping with the fact you don't own a single brick of this house? The crowd murmured. Someone muttered, damn, she's got receipts. And I did. Literally. I darted back inside, grabbed my contingency folder, and returned to the porch with it clutched in my hands. Since you want an audience, let's give them one. I shouted. Here's the mail forwarding form. Not my signature. Here's the text where you said I'd adjust. Here's your group chat where you planned out my reading nook as a yoga corner. Should I keep going? Avery's smile cracked. For the first time, her eyes flickered. She wasn't expecting me to fight fire with gasoline. Jonna hissed, put that down. You're making a fool of yourself. No, Jonna, I said sweetly, venom dripping from every word. Your daughter's doing a fine job of that without my help. The crowd laughed. Actually laughed. Phones angled tighter. And then same part, Avery jumped down from the chair, stormed up my steps, and tried to rip the folder out of my hands. She lunged like a woman possessed, nails clawing the air, but she tripped. Right there, in front of everyone, she tripped on the last step and went sprawling across my porch like a bad soap opera stunt double. Papers scattered, the megaphone clattered, and the casserole Jonna was clutching tipped, splattering pasta across my welcome mat. The silence that followed was electric. Then someone burst out laughing. Then another. And another. The sound rolled across the street like a wave. I stood over her, folder still in hand, and said calmly, "And safe conditions. Seems like the only danger here is your balance." Sarcasm, sharp as glass. The crowd ate it up. By evening, the video was everywhere. In-law protest gone wrong trended locally on Facebook. Some teenager on TikTok edited it with circus music. Thousands of views. Comments ranged from Team Mom to "That fool deserves an Oscar." Avery's campaign had imploded in one slapstick stunt, but the damage wasn't over. Because humiliation only makes people like her more dangerous. That night, my phone buzzed. A text from Mason, "You didn't have to do that." She's humiliated. "We're family, family." The word burned. I typed back, "Family doesn't steal keys. Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't stage protests in your yard." Then I put my phone face down and let the silence answer for me. Still, I couldn't shake the fear. Avery might have lost round one in public, but she wasn't finished. I knew it. And sure enough, the next week, a thick envelope arrived. Legal stationery. Petition for guardianship. Filed in court. My hands shook as I read the words. They were really trying to take everything: my house, my independence, my freedom. I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. Then I laughed. Not soft. Not nervous. A bitter, furious laugh that echoed off the walls. "You want a war, Avery?" I whispered to the empty room. "Fine, let's go to war." And in that moment, I decided if they wanted to play dirty, I'd play savage. Asterisk. The guardianship petition was bad enough. But the real punch to the gut came 2 days later when my lawyer called. "Have you checked your credit report lately?" she asked. I frowned. Why would I? Because there are 3 new credit inquiries in your name. 2 for furniture rentals. 1 for a joint utility account. My stomach dropped. She continued, her voice sharp. "They're setting up paper trails, making it look like you already authorized them to live there. If this goes to court, they'll claim you were supporting the arrangement financially." I sank into my porch chair, the lake glittering like it didn't care my life was unraveling. So they're not just trying to move in. They're staging an entire financial fiction. Exactly, she said. "We need to hit back fast." That night, I pulled out every financial document I had. Mortgage statement, deed, tax receipts. All proof the house was mine alone. Then I noticed something tucked in with my latest bank statement, an overdraft notice for a checking account I'd closed years ago. Except it wasn't closed. Someone had reopened it online. In my name. I called the bank immediately. After the usual runaround, a manager admitted, "It looks like a joint user was added. Avery Carlson." I swear my hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. "She added herself to my account." "Yes, ma'am. It was submitted with your information." We'll investigate the authorization, but it could take weeks. Weeks. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. Avery wasn't just pushing boundaries. She was actively trying to tie me to her financially, to blur the line between what was mine and what was hers until the court couldn't tell the difference. The next day, I confronted Mason. He met me at a cafe. Eyes tired, voice soft. "Mom," he began, "you're making this harder than it has to be. Avery just wants stability for the kids. We're drowning in rent, in debt. This house could change everything for us." I snapped. "Change everything for you? Mason, I worked 50 years for this place. I pawned my wedding bracelet to send you on a school trip. I sold your father's coin collection to pay your tuition. And you're telling me I should just hand it all over because you can't manage a budget?" He winced. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" My voice cracked. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like theft." He dropped his gaze, stirred his coffee, said nothing. That silence told me everything. I went home and called my lawyer again. She was blunt. "They're trying to prove financial dependence. We're going to prove the opposite. Start pulling records of every sacrifice you made. Tuition payments, medical bills, anything that shows you've carried the weight, and they've contributed nothing." So I did. I dug through file boxes, old check stubs, and receipts. The stack grew higher by the hour. Proof of Mason's college tuition I paid alone, the down payment for his first car, the endless health insurance premiums. All me, never them. But the deeper I dug, the darker it got, because tucked in the back of one file, I found a letter addressed to Mason, dated 3 years ago, from his employer's HR department. It congratulated him on cashing out his 401k early for a family investment property. My blood ran cold. I had never heard about this. And the address on the paperwork. My old apartment. He'd used my mailing address. So while I was busting my back saving for this house, Mason had liquidated his retirement fund to bankroll. "What?" I called the number on the letter. The clerk was polite but firm. "Yes, that disbursement was made. Recipient, Mason L. Transfer deposited into an account ending in 0427. Joint holder, Avery C. I dropped the phone. All those years I thought they were just scraping by. Turns out, they had cash. They just burned through it chasing some dream I wasn't included in. And now, after squandering their chance, they were circling mine like vultures. The fury was volcanic. That evening, I drafted a will update. My lawyer came over, and we sat at the kitchen table while I signed the papers. Mason's name erased. Every asset rooted into a trust for a housing foundation for women fighting property disputes. "This will drive them insane," she said, her eyes gleaming. "Good," I replied. "Let them choke on it." But Avery wasn't done. That weekend, she pulled her boldest stunt yet. I came home from grocery shopping to find a U-Haul in my driveway. Movers hauling boxes up the steps. Avery directing them like a general. Jana was inside, already unpacking dishes into my cabinets. I nearly dropped the grocery bags. "What the hell is this?" I shouted. Avery smirked. "Oh, didn't Mason tell you? The utilities are in our name now. We're establishing residency. Squatters' rights, sweetie. You can't kick us out once we're settled." My jaw dropped. Squatters' rights. In my house. I marched past her, ripped the plug on the lamp one of the movers was setting up, and snapped, "Touch one more thing, and I'll have the sheriff here in 5 minutes. The movers froze, looked at each other. Then one muttered, "Lady, we don't get paid enough for this," and dropped the box on the porch. Avery's smirk faltered. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a fight over a house anymore. It was a war over my very name, my history, my right to exist on my own terms, and I was done playing nice. Asterisk. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house sounded like a warning. Every shadow in the window felt like Avery, lurking, planning her next move. By morning, I had a plan. My lawyer and I would file an emergency injunction to block any residency claims. But as I gathered more documents, one fall slipped from the pile of an old manila envelope I hadn't opened in years. Inside was a birth certificate. Mason's. I stared at it. The edges yellowed with time. And then my stomach twisted, because his father's name wasn't there. For 50 years I'd let everyone believe Mason's dad, my late husband, was his father. Mason believed it. I never corrected him. But the truth was printed in black ink, fathered and known. The secret I had buried my entire adult life. I sat down hard in my chair. Memories flooded back. The whirlwind fling before I met my husband. The fear. The decision to keep it quiet. And then my husband, unkind, steady, who never asked questions when I told him Mason was his. He just loved that boy like his own until the day he died. But now, with Avery circling like a vulture, this secret wasn't just shame. It was ammunition. Because if Mason ever tried to claim inheritance through his father, he had no legal standing. None. The house, the assets, they were never tied to him by blood or paper. My husband's name wasn't on his birth certificate, and Avery had no idea. That afternoon, I met Mason at a diner. He looked exhausted, hollowed out. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. Avery wasn't with him. He slid into the booth, lowered his voice. "Mom, please. Just give her some time. She's not as bad as she seems." I laughed bitterly. "Not as bad. Mason, she staged a protest in my yard. She tried to steal my bank account. She literally rented a U-Haul and packed dishes into my cabinets. What exactly would bad look like to you?" He flinched, stirring his coffee. She wants security. She's scared. Scared. I shot back. Of what? Having to pay her own bills. Then I leaned across the table, lowered my voice. "Mason, you need to hear something. And you won't like it." His eyes flicked up, wary. "Your father, the man you thought was your father, isn't listed on your birth certificate." I slid the paper across the table. His hands shook as he read it. He looked at me, face pale. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying legally, you have no claim to anything your father owned. Not the coins I sold for tuition. Not this house. Nothing. Everything I've built is mine." And Avery can scream until she loses her voice, but she has zero legal ground to stand on. He sat there, silent, tears welling in his eyes. Finally, he whispered, "You should have told me." "Maybe," I admitted. "But I didn't, because it didn't matter. He loved you like you were his blood. That's what mattered. But now, Avery's turned this into a war. And if you're not on my side, Mason, you'll lose more than a house. You'll lose me." He wiped his face, shoved the birth certificate back across the table. "She doesn't know this, does she?" "No," I said coldly. "And she never will. Unless I have to use it." That evening, I got a knock at the door. It wasn't Avery. It wasn't Mason. It was a sheriff's deputy. "Ma'am, we've had a report of elder neglect at this address. We'll need to do a wellness check." My blood boiled. Avery again. I welcomed him in, showed him the clean kitchen, the stocked fridge, the medical records proving I had no conditions impairing me. He nodded, polite, clearly annoyed he'd wasted his time. As he left, he said quietly, "You're not the first person she's targeted. Just document everything." I closed the door, hands shaking. Then I laughed, because suddenly, I realized Avery was about to walk into a trap she couldn't escape. Because while she was filing false reports, staging protests, and screaming about inheritance, she didn't know she was building her entire scheme on a lie. Mason wasn't there. She thought he was. And if she pushed this into court, I'd drop that bombshell in front of everyone. The next morning, Mason texted me, "She's planning something big. I can't stop her." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Then let her. The bigger she plays, the harder she'll fall." Because I was done being soft. Avery wanted a war. She was about to lose everything in one savage move. Asterisk. Court day. The hallway outside the courtroom buzzed with whispers. Avery strutted in like she was the star of a reality show, wearing a blazer far too expensive for someone supposedly drowning in debt. John F. followed, clutching a Bible for effect. Mason trailed behind, shoulders slumped, avoiding my eyes. She spotted me and smirked. "You ready to lose, sweetheart?" she whispered as she brushed past. I smiled sweetly. "Ladies first." The judge called us in. We took our seats. Avery's lawyer, slick, young, and clearly convinced this was an easy win, began his opening argument about my declining capacity and the moral obligation of family to provide oversight. Avery dabbed her eyes with a tissue, rehearsed tears glistening under the fluorescent lights. I sat calm, silent, waiting. Then it was my lawyer's turn. She stood, steady, deliberate, and placed a thick folder on the desk with a satisfying thud. "Your Honor," she began, "before we discuss guardianship, I'd like to present evidence of attempted fraud." The courtroom hushed. She laid out the forged mail forwarding order, the bank account manipulation, screenshots of Avery's group chat planning how to convert the reading nook into a yoga corner. Laughter rippled in the gallery. Avery's smile faltered, and finally, my lawyer said, her voice sharp as a blade, "We have evidence this petition is based on a false assumption, namely, that my client's son is a legal heir." The room froze. Mason's head shot up. Avery stiffened. My lawyer held up the birth certificate. Father had known, not the late Mr. L, as has been implied. Therefore, no bloodline claim exists on this property or its assets. This case is not just frivolous, it's fraudulent. The explosion of whispers shook the room. Avery went pale, then red. Mason buried his face in his hands. Jonna muttered something about lies and clutched her Bible tighter. The judge banged the gavel. "Order." Then he turned to Avery's lawyer. "Do you have a rebuttal?" The man stammered, flipping through his notes like a drowning sailor searching for a lifeboat. Your Honor. We, request a recess? Denied, the judge snapped. This case is dismissed. Effective immediately. Outside the courtroom, reporters, yes, actual reporters, swarmed. The video of Avery's driveway protest had gone viral enough to attract local media. Microphones thrust forward, questions flying. Mom, how does it feel to have beaten your in-laws in court? What do you want to say to families dealing with similar situations? I held up the deed. Calm, steady. This house is mine. My peace is mine. And let me be clear, silence is not weakness. It's strategy. Never let anyone decide your worth for you. The cameras flashed. The crowd erupted in cheers. And Avery. She tried to storm past the reporters, but one of them shouted, "How's that yoga nook coming along?" The laughter that followed will ring in my ears for the rest of my life. At night, I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, lake reflecting the moon. The house was silent again. Hooligan. Mason showed up quietly. No Avery, no kids, just him. He stood at the bottom of the steps, eyes swollen. Mom, he whispered, I didn't know. About Dad, about any of it, I sighed. And I didn't want you to. Because it didn't matter. He loved you. I loved you. That was enough. Tears streaked his face. I'm sorry. I nodded, I know. But sorry won't fix this. You let her almost destroy me. And I can't forget that. He nodded, broken, and walked away into the night. I didn't stop him. Weeks passed. The gossip died down. Avery vanished from social media. Jonna retreated quietly, too embarrassed to show her face. And me. I reclaimed my life. I donated the spare furniture. Turned the guest room into a painting studio. Bright canvases filled the walls, wild strokes of color. Messy, free. Every morning, I sat on my porch with my chipped mug and watched the sun rise over the lake. No keys hidden under mats. No spare sets floating in other people's pockets. No whispers about guardianship or squatters' rights. Just me, my house, my life, and the memory of the moment I closed the door on all of them. A slow, deliberate, final. They thought they could erase me. But instead, I erased them. Sometimes the loudest revenge isn't shouting, or even winning in court. Sometimes it's the quiet clink of a coffee mug on a porch railing, the sound of a door that only opens for you, and the peace of knowing you were underestimated. And you survived anyway. Asterisk. That's the end of today's story. Did things turn out the way you thought? Or were there some surprises along the way? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you haven't joined the community yet, now's the perfect time. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're always the first to catch new stories. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you in the next adventure. Asterisk.